This is our video for EA4 about presenting a graph. Remember in class we looked at these 4 different graphs and we decided that this type of graph was the most useful for making predictions when we haven't measured a specific value. So we've got these measured values that are these dots here, but if we want to predict something that we haven't measured, we want to make a graph like this. So we're going to use EA4 to describe to ourselves how to make those graphs. And we had a lot of good suggestions from students on how to do that. We're going to start with Anaya, Caitlin, and Ashley from period 1. And I really like that they had basically step 1. They said determine what the independent and dependent variable are for the experiment. So I'm going to say step 1, figure out the IV and DV. And if you want to look on page 53 of your notes, that is page 53 of your notes is back here, we took some notes on how you would figure out what the IV and DV are for an experiment. But that is going to be step 1. The reason for that is step 2 is going to be to add axis labels with correct units and variable names. So I really like how Destiny and Milka in period 3 did this on their paper. They added these labels and they showed us that anytime we make a graph, the independent variable is going to go on the x-axis. So this we're usually going to refer to this by the actual name of whatever it is that we're graphing, but in general, we want to make sure that the IV with units is on the x-axis and the DV, that is the dependent variable with units, is going to be on the y-axis. We won't usually call these the x and y axis. We'll call them whatever is graphed on that axis. Make sure that you have some room here to add numbers. We're going to add numbers on that graph, so make sure that when you write this, you've written it with some space here to write more later on. So step 3, Step 3 would be to add a title, and in fact both Destiny and Milka and Anaya and Caitlin and Ashley suggested the title should be the effect of whatever the independent variable is on the dependent variable. So I'm going to write this exactly the way Destiny and Milka did it. I'm going to say for the title we should always call our graphs effect of whatever the IV is on whatever the DV is. And this is obviously going to be the actual names of the variables rather than just writing independent variable and dependent variable. So if we look at Hobby and Limeri's suggestion, they're saying write the names of the actual variables, don't just write independent and dependent variables. So I'm going to make that note here. Name the actual variable here and here, for example. Don't just write IV and DV when you make your title or you label your variable names on the axes. So then step 4, we're almost done here, is to think about how you're going to actually label the numbers here. And we had a few good suggestions. We're going to come back to Hobby and Limeri's paper in a moment. But we had a few good suggestions. So, for example, Sam and Aaron and Jesusen and Yakuba in period 3 had this very, very important suggestion. Make sure that the intervals on the axis don't change. The idea is when we make this axis, we want to make sure that the numbers are consistent with the pattern. For example, this goes 0, 20, 40, 60, 80. This goes 0, 20, 40, 60, 80. Rather than going 18, 24, 28, 39. That is like there's no pattern here, but there is a pattern here, 0, 20, 40, 60, 80. So we want to make sure that we label those axes with that consistent pattern. And that would actually be step 4. I'm going to add something to this that no one wrote, but I'm adding it to our consensus notes saying that this is another important thing to keep in mind. You want to scale axes. A-X-E-S is the plural of axis. So scale your axes with a constant pattern. This is not new, but it is new that I want you to start, starting from 0. We'll say more about this in the next notes that we take, but it is very important that the notes actually do start from 0. For other things that we're going to be doing in this class, it is important that the notes start from 0. So I wanted to add something to this that was something that Hobby and Limeri suggested, and actually we had some other suggestions from people too. If we look at Kevin and Alpha and Katie's paper, they suggested that you make sure that you have enough room for more points in the graph. If you want to make predictions for higher values that you haven't measured, you need to actually put them in your graph so that you can see what the graph is doing there. And Hobby and Limeri had a slightly different suggestion, but it's related. They said, put it up to the greatest height. That is, look in the data table to see what the highest number is and make sure that you have room for that in your data table. And just like Sam and Jesusen and Yakuba and Aaron were suggesting, use a pattern for counting. So I'm gonna put it like this to kind of like add to this note. I'm gonna say, this is sort of continuing over here. Start from 0 on your scale up to at least the highest number in the table, or larger if you need to predict. So that was the suggestion that Kevin and Alpha and Katie made, that is like use larger numbers in your graph if you need to predict larger numbers. This is something we're going to look more at later, but starting from 0 and this next part that we're going to write, I'm actually going to put 2 stars next to it, is the thing that these folks suggested. Make sure that the intervals on the axis don't change. I'm going to write that almost exactly like they did. Make sure that you can write the word intervals here if you know what the word intervals mean. If you're not familiar with the word intervals, you can write this. Make sure that the number jumps, that is like where the numbers jump to from one number to the other on each axis, don't change. So, for example, if we started from 0 on both axes, we could go 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100. That would be a consistent jump of 20 for every 2 boxes. But we could also, on the same graph, label this as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. They don't have to be the same as each other, but they should be consistent as you go up from 0. So the last thing we're going to say, I actually would like to wait on the details. We'll go over the specifics of this in another notes video later on, but we're just going to write this. It relates to something that Rocky and Fabian and JBH were suggesting. That is, sometimes you can include a trend line, but not necessarily always, but never. Yolanda, Daniela, and Ryan pointed out, you're not actually connecting the points. The goal here is to never connect the points, but you do want to think about this trend line. We'll talk more about the trend line soon. So I'm going to put the note like this. Do not connect points. Add a trend line only if the pattern looks like a line. Again, we'll talk more about that later. If you're running out of room here, and you're getting angry at me because you are running out of room, you can continue over on here a little bit. We are going to be taking notes on this next page on Monday, but if you need more room, you can do that over here and kind of like bleed over. Just make sure that you have some room here.